When love vanishes, the art of deception. I know I promised to wait until my divorce is finalized before asking you to marry me, but I almost proposed yesterday. I love you so much. It was one of the last things he ever said to her. He introduced her to his kids, promised forever, and then vanished. This isn't just heartbreak. It's a RomCon. Welcome to RomConned. I'm Laurel House, dating and relationship expert, joined by my co-host, criminologist, Dr. Alex Del Carmen. Today's show is about how love and illusion intersect when words feel like art painted on a canvas of a lie.
Emotional manipulation is a pattern that I see over and over again. The offender creates a narrative of hope, trust, and dependence, and then disappears, leaving confusion and trauma behind.
Our guest today is Dr. Lizzie Daston, an art historian and professor who spends her life interpreting truth and illusion in art, and yet found herself in a romantic illusion of her own. Lizzie's story is about hope, charm, and the sudden silence that follows a con. Lizzie was RomConned. Lizzie, how would you describe your story?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show, and the way that you just synthesized my personal life with my professional and the art and the analysis was so brilliant. And I had never thought of it that way. And now I feel even more conned because I should be dealing with this and I should have known better and I didn't. So I'm really excited to do a postmortem. This happened years ago and it has a very happy ending. So I'm approaching this conversation and story with curiosity. And I think it's really going to help heal a past version of myself.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Lizzie. Shifting the perspective from pain to curiosity allows you to shift out of that hurt space and into that space of, I wonder why. I wonder what happened. And I love that you said that this is a postmortem because, especially with Dr. Alex having his analysis of everything, it really does allow us to say, you know what? It is a postmortem. Let's put that to bed. That is the old, that is dead. And now let's move forward and see what happened. How did this thing die? And what did this jerk do to me?
Yes, let's get into it. So I met Michael years ago. He was a producer, could still be a producer. And we were talking about doing a street art competition show. And he lived in DC and he came out to LA for this meeting. And immediately he was so engaging and kept on telling me that he was going to make me a star. And I'm a nerdy academic. I've never had ambitions to be a star, but who doesn't want to hear that they could be one? And that just felt really intoxicating. And immediately he was just texting me and texting me. And I had never been in a romantic relationship before, really, never anything serious. I had never been in love. Nobody had ever told me that they loved me in this way. And from our very early days, Michael was just inundating me with so much positive affirmations, so many validations of how amazing I was, how smart, how beautiful. And he had children and he lived in DC. But the day I met him, he said, "Oh, it's so great. What a coincidence that I met you because I was going to move to LA anyway." And he framed our conversations with that eventuality, with that promise.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
our relationship was long distance for a long time, which I actually think was really beneficial to me because I didn't have that fear of physical intimacy thrown into my face, that expectation. I could have room to develop our emotional intimacy, which is where I'm more comfortable anyway. And then by the time we saw each other, I already had this foundation. And he just came on really strong, basically told me that we were in a relationship, told me that it was incredibly serious. I organized this benefit auction And all my friends came, all my family. And this was maybe a month and a half into our dating. And he came out and he told everybody that we were going to get married, we were going to have babies, he was going to move. And my friends were a little bit alarmed, but I
Yeah.
don't tend to listen to the feedback from other people, only my mother's. And she didn't say anything. And so I just carried on and figured that my friends had never seen me in a relationship. And so they didn't quite know how to process the changes.
What was happening on your end? Were you telling your friends, I'm in love with this guy, we're going to get married, we're going to have children? Were you telling your mom, I'm in love with this guy, we're going to have children and get married? Or what was your side of this equation? He's coming in hard and fast. What are you doing?
Not quite as hard, not quite as fast. I was really excited that this was finally happening to me. And
Mm-hmm.
my mom, whenever I would talk to her about it, she said, I've never seen anybody so in love. And we would chuckle about it. So I never matched that intensity. I always thought that it was a little bit off putting. Same time.
Meaning that she's never seen someone in love how he was loving you as opposed to how you were loving him.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
knew that it was a little odd, but he had just gotten out of a marriage. He had moved from one identity to another, the identity of nuclear family to
Mm-hmm.
dating this single, unencumbered person from across the country who is interested in such a different professional life than he was. So it just seems like he was acting with the enthusiasm of a convert. And so I figured it would calm down. And it never did. And he would just buy me constant presents that were so specific to me. I'll never forget there was this one beanie with Bluetooth in it so that anytime I had to go to the doctor to get blood drawn, I could put it over my eyes and listen to Stephen Sondheim. Very specific, tailored to
Thoughtful.
me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought he had a running list on his phone of songs that I might want played at our wedding. Like it was really very intense. And I just allowed myself to go for this ride. I was told we
Mm-hmm.
were together. I was told we were serious. And it
So
felt
he said to you, we are in a serious relationship. And your response is, okay, I guess we are in a serious relationship. Or how did that go?
Yeah, I had no agency, which is what I learned about myself and my role in this after the fact.
Okay.
He introduced me to his kids and he said to them, "This is your future stepmother." It was just this train that was going very quickly. I used to drive a Mini Cooper and he said that it was too small for a car seat for when we had kids. So we went and we got a new car that would fit a car seat. It was for a future that we were sharing together. And I remember there was one time, probably 3 months into our dating, when I said, if things work out. And at this point, I hadn't yet met his children. And he got so mad at me. It was a visual that I will always have. He was crying and he slid down my wall and crumpled on the floor. And he's like, "How could you say if? I'm leaving my children for you." And I said, "Michael, I'm not asking you to leave anybody for me. I said if because we've been dating for 3 months. I don't know. Your kids could hate me and then you shouldn't be with me." And so that was just odd. His behavior
Yeah.
was odd, but I did not let it dissuade me, which
So
is
it
all.
seems like at this point, you were still dating head first. I believe in the three H's: head first, heart, and then hormones. And you were still very much in your head with the if we stay together and this is strange and he is doing this and I'm just going to sit and watch what he's doing and take it in. It doesn't feel like at this point you were yet folded into all that he was presenting.
I think that's a really good point. And I probably wasn't, but my heart and my hormones were definitely about to. There was a coup on my
Their
head.
entrance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were going to win. And it was just so exciting for me, so
Yeah.
dazzling to hear all of these things that I've been waiting my whole life to hear. I've always wanted to be a mother, I've always wanted to be a partner. And it just seems like finally these things were being presented to me. And
Mm-hmm.
then once I met his kids and once he said that I was going to be their stepmother, that's probably when the head just took a back seat to the heart, because I thought, great, I'm not going to mess with these kids' emotions. Like, this is happening. And it was wonderful for a time. And there were some off moments. I'll never forget. We went on this cross country road trip and I asked to see his driver's license because everybody has a really silly, terrible driver's license picture. And I wanted to see his, and he wouldn't show it to me. And then he said to the guy that we were renting the van from, he said, I can't give her everything. And I thought, oh, he's probably lying about his age. But it was just
Mm.
really weird. And I did find out that he was maybe 8 years older than he claimed to be. So he was
Okay.
about 15 or 17. I can't remember specifically now, but he was significantly older, which also felt like a con. Let me be the one to decide if you're an appropriate age for me and give me the fullness of who you are. And then we can decide if we're right, if we're a fit. So that seemed a
So
little
he was
bit,
8 years older than he had said. So he was actually 17 years older than you.
yes.
Lizzie, let me ask you something real quick. He didn't want to show you the driver's license. Was that the first time that he said no to you as far as you're requesting something about his lineage or his family or his connections or his address or his age? Was that the first time that he ever said no to you?
That was the first time that he said no to me. And I think I had suspected inconsistencies in his timeline because when I met him, he was a producer. He also was trained as a lawyer and he also was a restaurateur. He switched cars all the time. He had this long marriage. He had a dog that all of a sudden he didn't want. And so instead of thinking maybe he is older than I suspected, I just thought he's constantly in pursuit of something that feels most authentic to him. I definitely misread. And I think that there is a deep dissatisfaction within him. And so nothing is enough. But I saw that as, well, we all have different shades. And so maybe he just wants to better know his own shades. And it's not that he's leaping from thing to thing because he's dissatisfied with something innate within himself or whatever it may be. But I saw it as something else because I wanted to see that. So we went on vacation with my family, and all of our romance, this whole thing was within the space of 9 months. So it was very truncated, but it was really intense. We went to New York once and he said that we were pre-engaged. And I said, "What is that? Isn't that just dating?" And he said, "No, we're pre-engaged. We're very close. I'm going to take you to Paris over your birthday and propose then." So right when the summer's ending, I couldn't wait because then the normalcy of actual life was going to come. And we would see each
Mhm.
other when we're grumpy with a cold or figure out the logistics of a cross country relationship. And I was never able to be within that normalcy because he, we left this vacation. That's when he said that he almost proposed to me. It was another time he brought that up. And he was supposed to come back to LA. And he called me that morning, right before his flight. And he said, "Everything is okay, but I'm not coming." And I have only heard the trueness of my own intuition twice. And that was one of those times where I inserted ever. So when he said, "I'm not going to come to LA," my body knew that he would never come back. And he didn't. And I never saw him again. And we didn't break up right away. He said he had a panic attack and it had nothing to do with me. He loved me. We were going to be together. Everything was great. But he had stuff to figure out. And then over the course of the next 6 weeks, he made a myriad of excuses. A deer hit his car, his back hurt. He had to do trick or treating with his kids. That one was legitimate, but the deer, I just don't know. And every weekend he said he was coming. And then every weekend there was a reason why he couldn't be there. And then eventually, after these 6 weeks, when I was just so confused, I didn't feel safe, I didn't know what was happening. I kept on trying to talk to him about what was going on with him, how I could support him. And he just said that we were bickering like his parents did. And it was really perplexing. There was one night when I couldn't get a hold of him and he wouldn't location share with me. So I didn't, or he expected me to location share with him, but he wouldn't reciprocate, which again, this is on me.
Interesting.
That's a huge red flag, but I didn't know where he wasn't answering his phone. I was so concerned that something had happened. And he said he was at a friend's and his phone died and he fell asleep. So I'm sure he was unfaithful. It doesn't matter, but I imagine he was. And it was just getting progressively worse. I was so just emotionally fragile and didn't know how we were going to move forward, but I was so invested in doing so. And then we had a call and I asked him how old he was, which I can't believe I got the chutzpah to do that. And he said, I'm as old as I've always been.
Nah. He couldn't remember what he had said.
He admitted that he was older, but he did not admit that he had lied. He said that I just was misremembering. And then he said to me, I'm never going to move to LA. I never said I was going to move. And he said that we just couldn't do the long distance. And I thought about at the time saying we could talk about it. Maybe I could be in DC for a little bit. And then I thought, no, this man obviously does not see a future with me. And I am not going to plead a case for myself. That's just not what's going to happen. And it was really devastating. It was very hard for me to regain my footing, to figure out my part, which is all that I can control. But he and I have not spoken since we broke up. And I remember how painful it was. This is the most devastated I have ever been. And I heard him putting away his dishes. And I thought, wow, he made it seem like he was the one who was so much more serious. But then at the end, it felt like he was just cold, impartial, didn't care. And he was able to just put away his plates while my life was.
It's so interesting because this shift from intimacy to disappearance is what makes this a rom-con, not just a breakup. And I feel like a lot of people actually go through this type of discreet rom-con where they don't know, was I just conned? Am I crazy? Was I misled? Was this just a terrible breakup? And within that confusion is where you can start to think, hold on a second. I was actually conned. This was a bait and switch. He did the classic future faking, and that's a control technique, flooding the victim with grand promises, creating emotional dependency, then quickly, immediately, drastically withdrawing to maintain power through confusion. And it seems like in that moment, what you're saying, it was such a painful breakup for you. It was also your first real love, the first time you've experienced that flood of those chemicals that felt so good in your brain. And all of a sudden, they disappear. They are gone. So what do you think, Dr. Alex?
I think that, first of all, thank you for being here, Lizzie, and for having the courage to tell your story, because I always say that it is because of folks like you that really make not only this program possible, but also that other people are listening to this and they're going to use this information for their benefit, right? So that's the whole point of doing this. But I will tell you that generally we love to hear that we're special. We just do. All human beings are. Our trend and our instinct is that we want to be told, you're amazing, you're incredible, I've been waiting for you my entire life, you are who I dreamed of. And so those words are powerful. And I say we because you and I share our common love for academia. We are, especially as an art historian yourself, the power of words and history and art. You're an artist. And not only are you an artist, but you understand the history of art, which is even more complex, right? Brilliant on your part. And so all of those things, connecting all of those dots with your academic background and with your love for passion and the stages of history that have inspired people to do certain things. I'm sure that you connected all those things subliminally and you said, this is my time. This is my time. And why not? Why can't it be that somebody just falls head over heels for me, that want to change his entire life and his entire world? And your mom, although I don't know her, but I imagine that the reason why she probably didn't have any red flags about this is because what do all of us parents want to think about our kids? Our kids are amazing. Of course somebody's going to fall in love with my daughter. She's beautiful, smart, and all these amazing things. And so I think, and some of these folks that are coming in really strong, when they're stopped, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things, but when they're stopped at their track, when you say, wait a minute, you really can't come in here and take over my entire life and tell me you fell in love with me head over heels and in 2 days we're going to get married. That's not going to happen, okay? If you would have taken that pause and that moment to stop him definitively, I think that there would have been two outcomes to this. Either one, that he would have been more emphatical and he would have tried harder just by the mere challenge of conquering you. But the other side of it is he probably said what criminals do when they go and rob a house. I'm going to look for a place where it's actually easier for me to go steal something or rob something than for me to go into a place where there's going to be a lot of light and there may be police officers that will respond right away. So they'll look for the softest target. We actually call that in criminology target hardening. The idea of making your target very hard to penetrate. In this particular case, it would be you basically bringing up the fence and saying, you're not coming here right now. You have to prove yourself to me first.
And by Lizzie allowing him to know this is my first love, he felt, oh, this is a soft target. And then when she starts to harden up, she's not falling for it yet. She's still head first dating. So what does he do? Brings in the kids. And because knowing that Lizzie always wanted to be a mom, all right, this is going to soften the target. And it's really sad that a dad would do that to his children and manipulate them by allowing their hearts to get involved in this relationship, because that's love bombing his children as well. And this love bombing followed by ghosting, that's psychological whiplash. Your heart wants to believe he was real, and your brain is now saying, but he's gone. And what was happening in the children's minds as well, simultaneously. So it's really sad what conners do.
And the other part of this too, which I think is important, and you mentioned it, and you were very emphatical in your words. I paid attention to the way you said this because I would have felt the same way as you, in the sense that when you said even his kids got involved, and you said when his kids were part of the equation, I knew, and I'm paraphrasing here, I knew that he was serious.
Right.
Because what do we assume? We assume that, first of all, everyone's got the same values that we do.
Yes.
Secondly, we assume that, a human being that's a decent person would never put his kids through this for the sake of a fake relationship or to manipulate somebody. And then thirdly, because the kids are involved, to a single dad, and I was one for a while, I can tell you that for a single dad, there's nothing more precious than his children, right? Just like it is for a single mom as well. So you're not going to put your kids out there and introduce them to their mom, their future mom or stepmom, for the sake of trying to manipulate somebody. Like, who does that, right? So I'm sure that all of those sort of rules, that we call it the social contract, right? So we're born into the social contract that has all these assumptions about how people should behave. And I think most of us would have responded the same way you did. But I also will tell you that one of the things that I noted in the early stages of you meeting him and all that is that he began dictating not only the rules of engagement, but also the parameters of the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? So that shows you control.
Yes.
So in other words, he may be a romantic, he may be in love with you, but boy, he wants to control that environment. He wants to make sure that you are within that control. And sometimes the addiction of control, Lizzie, supersedes their desire to do anything else. And once they find that control has been achieved, then you're no longer interested. Right. So like most people think that it's just because of sex or because of money. And of course, we've seen cases of those, not only on the show, but throughout life. But I think in this case, it's just the hunger If I were to diagnose him without meeting him, but just based on your story, I would say just his hunger, he's starving for control.
Yeah.
And it's probably because he has very little of it in his
Right.
real life. And so he wanted to control you. And once he convinced himself that he was in charge of everything, your emotions, where you were going to go, how you were going to do things, you're no longer interesting. You're no longer a project. And so at that point, he disengages and he goes to find his next victim.
What's going on? Because you seem to be a little bit unsure. Honestly, I don't know. There were some strange things that were happening, and I started asking questions, and I felt like his answers didn't align with how he portrayed himself. When something feels off, that's your intuition, bringing awareness to the fact that you have some questions. There's a website that I love called TruthFinder. TruthFinder can help us figure out if these are real red flags or if he's the real deal. We do a little bit of a background check. TruthFinder is a great way to simply deliver police records, arrest records, criminal records, speeding tickets, bankruptcy court records, voter registration data, social media handles, phone numbers, home addresses, email addresses, and possible relatives. And you know what we can learn from that? If he's actually married or if he's single. And you know what? While we're at it, it's not a bad idea to do a little search on you too, just to see what's out there, what people can find about you. You know what? I think it's a really good idea. This is going to give me so much more confidence dating. And I would like to do that search on me too. What if someone thinks that I'm fake?
And he probably thought it was exciting that your friends were a little bit taken aback when he was stating that you're in a serious relationship and that you're going to get married and have children together. That for him was probably a little bit exciting of, wow, look at the power I have here. Look what I've done. And it's interesting because Dr. Alex, we've talked about this before as well, that Lizzie teaches critical analysis, but in love, she just believed. And what we have found is that RomConners tend to actually target the people who one would believe they would never target, because they like to target the people who are really smart. They like to target the people who feel like they are not going to be harmed by this kind of thing because they would analyze it. But it's those people like you, like me, like us, who actually tend to fall for it because we don't expect it. We think they're not going to do it to us, and they think we're not going to do it to them. And so they do.
Yeah, and I will tell you also that don't also disregard the fact that you are not likely his first victim, but you're certainly not going to be his last one. And what I mean by that is that he's also learning from you or through you as to how people react towards different things. He's probably amused at the fact that you were so excited about having kids with him and that he was able to control you and exert influence to the extent that you went to change your car. That to him is a trophy, right? So it's a
and
trophy.
That you bought the car, that he was able to get you to buy a car.
Right. That's like a icing on the cake, because not only do I control the narrative, but I can control this woman to go out there and buy a car. The other part of this too, which should not be ignored, is that, and I say this because I spent 28 years in the academy, and I will tell you that academia, we have the most talented, brilliant people in the planet. There's no question. But because of that, I think there's a vulnerability that we have in our personal lives, because sometimes we're so into our research and into our world. We can talk about the things we love and the things we research ad nauseum. But when you get us out to the real world, we collapse. I remember, and I'll say this quick story. I remember one day walking on campus. I was assistant professor at the time and just a young person out of grad school. And I remember this one colleague that I had in the history department. He had been a professor for 30 plus years. His name was Steve. Brilliant guy. He had books that would pile up all the way to the ceiling in his office. And they all smelled like they were written 300 years ago. And you guys know what I'm talking about, right? So I remember just walking to campus and walking through his front door. And I saw him, and he was in his car, in his little car, and he was petrified. He was just hanging on to the steering wheel, shaking. And I walked up to him and I said, "Steve, are you okay?" And I noticed that right behind him was a police officer that had pulled him over for apparently speeding in like the 10-mile-an-hour zone. Like he was probably doing like 12 miles an hour or whatever. The guy could not even talk to me. He was so petrified. And then he said afterwards, he goes, "Thank you for de-escalating." And I'm thinking, de-escalating what? We criminologists, what makes us different from everybody else is the fact in academia is that we are out there in the crime scenes and talking to bad guys and going to prison and talking to really bad people, right? And so we're learning the mind, we're learning how people operate. So we're coming out completely jaded. We're very opposite, right, to the mainstream society because we're suspicious of everything.
Right.
We're suspicious of everybody, right? So it's really hard for us to trust anything or anybody. So this guy is like sitting there shaking. And then he comes up to me and he thanks me. "You would have thought that I saved his life." And I said, "Why are you so grateful?" And he goes, "Because you really saved me from this officer escalating." And I said, "The guy was super professional. He gave you his ticket, wished you a good day, and that was that. We all get tickets, Steve." But he was incredibly vulnerable. And I say that not to suggest that you would have acted that way. I know you're not. But my point is that I think in academia, we're in a bubble, right? And we live in that bubble, especially traditional academics that get out, when they're 26, 27 years old with their PhD, they go into academia and that's the only world they see. We are, as academics, we are an incredibly soft target. When you go to these conferences overseas, you'll see that the people that steal from purses, the people that go into hotel rooms to steal, the prostitutes, the male and female, all of them they inundate these academic conferences because they know that they have people that are typically very smart, but sometimes so smart that they can't see the threat in front of them. And they're true believers, right? Because we're true believers. So I think that there's an element that he was probably very intentional in seeking you in the sense that he knew you were very bright, that you knew your stuff, that you were stable, you were not going to harm his kids. But at the same time, boy, what an exercise that he could actually conquer the mind and the heart of a PhD.
And it's so true. Offenders often target empathetic, educated women because they value connection. We, especially people who are in our own bubbles, we really want to connect with people. We crave that connection with someone. And for him, the goal wasn't money. It was ego or psychological validation. And that's what's so difficult with RomCons. I know people who would say, "How is this a RomCon? He didn't steal her money. He didn't kill her. He didn't do any of these things." But it still is, if we think of what is a con, what is the definition of a con, Dr. Alex?
I would say something that stands against the truth, right? So it's the opposite of being truthful. And the con, the price to that con artist, let's use that term gently, is someone who could either gain access to money, information, or quite frankly, your feelings.
Yeah.
And somebody can control your mind, and your heart is part of that equation. They can control everything that you own, your potential for debt. They can control your emotional instability and instability. So for me, it's not, when we think of a RomCon, it's not necessarily somebody that comes in, presents themselves as if they're the most executive-like type of individual, and then before you know it, they're ripping you off. We do have those, right? But I think that there's also the individual, the bandit of hearts, the individual that goes out there and starts stealing people's feelings and manipulating. And you know what's really sad, Lizzie, is that they get better at it, because it's almost like you and I would define a student to go into an internship. You know what I'm talking about? They go into an internship and they get out, and there's like little subject matter experts. They know certain things and they feel pretty confident. That's how these people evolve. You got to remember, criminals evolve over time, right? We actually have a term in criminology where we call it the aging out process. And what that means is that a criminal, basically, as he or she gets older, they get lazier and their crimes become easier for the body. In other words, they'll steal money from you through a computer as opposed to doing it at a bank, right? Because they're going to run as fast. They're not going to be as agile as they used to be. However, in this particular case, the more they age, the better they get at it. Then at that point, you get a more serious, suited up guy that shows up and he's very respectful. This guy is legit. What could possibly go wrong? Plus, and then some other people say, I don't have anything to give him. I don't have any money. I'm not a millionaire. So why would he come after me? He's even introducing me kids. And the end result of that is, yeah, but you're giving him more something that he really wants. And that's control over you.
Yeah,
and your heart.
the gain is emotional exploitation, attention, control, admiration, and the silence after is part of the manipulation. It keeps the victim, it keeps you in suspense, hoping for that closure that will never come. And that continues even though he's long gone and he's probably conning someone else now. Thank goodness you got out of that. But in his mind, he's probably thinking, oh, Lizzie's still sitting there suffering. And that feels good. And maybe him having you purchase that car was so that he can get insight into your financial information, because when you buy a car, what happens? You have to give them so much of your financial information that if he was allowed to see any of that information, he could have very easily gotten into your bank accounts and stolen a lot more from you, in that he could have also stolen money and made
And
another con.
and I'll say this too. I'm going to take you through a very small and short journey into the dark mind of a criminal and a manipulator. But I'll just tell you, as I take you through this journey, the studies that we have recently conducted, for instance, on domestic violence, they show that when a man particularly, puts his hands around a woman, around her neck, she is, listen carefully, she is 10 times more likely to die as a result of a homicide than a man that would have never done that to her. In fact, we have cities all over the United States now that are adopting various mandates and statutes that essentially, for the first time a domestic violence offender will put his hands on her neck, he's gone to prison for a long time because of that correlation that exists. I say that to say this: don't ever disregard that this could have ended up in a tragedy, because people that have never killed before and people that have never hurt other people before physically, the addiction to control is so significant that he could have ended up going into that rabbit hole because of his desperation to control you somehow. And this is where the silver lining is. Your vulnerability towards the end, the fact that you asked him where he was and you wanted him to share information, that you showed interest still in him, is probably the reason why he didn't make you more of a conquest. Had you been quote unquote difficult to conquer all throughout, he would have stepped it up. And sometimes these folks, when we interview them in prison, and we do, when we try to talk to people, if you want to know what a tornado will do to you and to your home, you probably want to be present during the time a tornado hits so that you can understand it. So that's what we do in criminology. We meet really bad people. And when we meet them and we talk to them, and these are people that, and this is what I tell my students, I tell a lot of folks that are interested in the field, when you go into criminology, you understand that you're going to be talking to the devil almost every day. And you're going to also be explaining the devil every day. And so people think that these people are like the movies, where they show up with the knife and that they're all rough looking and all that. These are people in suits. These are people that look like you and me, and that you go to the movie theater and you're sitting down next to somebody that probably has somebody buried in their crawl space, and we just don't know. That's the reality in which we live. And I'm not trying to make the audience here going to creep mode today, but I will tell you that the reality of what we have around us is we have the potential of criminals, some of whom have exercised already that habit without really showing it to the world. Who knows? I think God saved you from being in a really bad situation. As you pointed out, this has a happy ending for you, and I'm glad, and we're very glad. But at the same time, for the audience out there, don't be careful, because something as quote unquote innocent as this could have been, it could also result in tragedy in a minute.
So let's break down Michael's red flags. So he was overly intimate immediately, very quickly, emotionally intimate, very expressive, doing the love bombing. He was future faking, making grand promises without any proof, stating we're in a relationship, stating we're getting married, I was about to propose, these are your stepchildren, we are going to have children of our own, having you buy a car so that you can put a car seat in. That's really rewiring your brain, creating a reality in your brain that actually didn't exist yet, because our brains don't necessarily don't know the truth, right? I always say, don't believe what you think. And the reason is because our brains believe what we put into it. So he's saying, we're going to have a family. We're going to have a car seat in your car. You need a new car. You are now creating a reality that doesn't exist. with him as the hero in this new future life with you. So that's the future faking. Then these public declarations of love very early on that shake up and almost isolate you from your friends. Your friends are like, whoa, what's happening? So this is creating distance. This is, I am with Lizzie. Michael and Lizzie are now together. Your friends are separate from us. We are getting married. They're all shaken up and shocked about this information. You are now together, a whole. And even your mom is in it. Okay, great. I've got the whole family with me. Then the abrupt disappearance once he had the emotional control. It's textbook emotional grooming. The offender tests boundaries through compliments and commitment, then controls the narrative by vanishing at the height of trust. Are there any red flags you think that I missed, Dr. Alex?
No, I think you nailed them. And I think most than anything is the speed, right? Which you mentioned first. And most people, I do believe that there are people that fall in love as soon as they meet. I really believe that. But I also think that there's rationality, there's reason, and all these other things that we have in our brain that can allow us to say, wait a minute. Once you have a sit down with the person and let's say you're both equally attractive and in love with each other, you know, that there are a series of steps that you have to follow. And most people that are successful in this world are people that are all about a program, all about steps, all about an agenda that needs to be brought forth in order to put all those pieces together. I think what is also interesting as we study victims, and I've been doing that for many years, is that we know that victims in their mind, they legitimize the relationship by virtue of the association that you already have in that relationship. And what I mean by that is you're dating this guy, right? And then all of a sudden he meets your immediate circle. And then so all the girls that met him, they're like, oh my gosh, he's so cute and he treats you so great. I'm so happy for you, Lizzie. That becomes a reinforcer. And so in your mind, he's already part of that area. Then your mom comes in and mom didn't object. If mom didn't object, clearly, she may not have said, I like him, but she didn't say she didn't like him. It's totally not what happened in high school, where she clearly told me that she didn't like half the boys that I hung out with. So something to that effect, where you can see how all of these things serve as validations. Yeah. Right. So all of these people around you are validating you and you think this is it. And that false security is what they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I think what the two of you have said, it's just so helpful. You have gotten every nuance of this relationship in my experience. And it's amazing just sharing with you for a few minutes, hearing the feedback that you offered. And that metaphor of the vulnerable house is so resonant for me because I basically had all of my doors and windows open with jewels on the couch. Like I was very vulnerable and very insecure. And so I understand how I was the softest of targets. And I'm grateful that it didn't go further than it did. And money did come up in odd ways, but I was never financially conned, but I see that I could have been. And
how so?
The car, the financials there, definitely. But when we were driving to get the car, he asked me, he said, okay, so tell me, what are your financials? Like, what do you have? And I figured this is going to be my partner. So I told him and he's, oh yeah, me too. Right around the same. Isn't that such a coincidence? So that I thought was a little odd. He never asked me for money. It never was a dynamic of our relationship, but he did take me on a vacation. And then in those 6 weeks before we broke up, he kept on complaining how expensive it was, how lucky I am that he spent so much money on me. Mm-hmm. And I had never had money be any kind of factor in any relationship that I've had before. So friendship or otherwise. So I just thought that was a little odd. So I can see how it could have escalated. But I wondered in thinking about this relationship for today's show, what the con was, because there was nothing tangible that he took from me. But I think, Dr. Alex, what you said about control, and Laurel, what you said about connection, that's really helpful. That maybe that was the con, those two factors.
No, you were also, don't underestimate the fact that He got more than a free meal out of you in the sense that he literally probably went out to eat several times and you fed him. And there were times when he found a recreational partner. I'm sure you're a lot of fun, that he went out and had fun with you. Also, don't put aside the reward that he got, which is training. He got a chance to see the things that you liked, you didn't like, how you reacted to certain things. And so he was a con in training. The only reason why you probably ended up still telling the story without a bank account with a whole bunch of zeros next to that is because of the fact that he was an amateur to some degree. His intentions were there, but he was learning the trade and he was learning it very well. And also don't dismiss the fact that this guy went through a divorce. He has 2 kids and he's also wanting to take revenge on the gender. And we've seen that also where there's gender revenge, just like women do to men, because my husband was this or that, so therefore I am going to treat every man that I meet from this point forward like they're lower than life. There are men out there that want to do the same thing with women. And that when they get divorced, they promise themselves that they'll never be a victim, as they perceive themselves to be a victim of a woman or a relationship, and they will make every woman pay for it. So there are a lot of things that satisfy this equation that may not be necessarily readily available as we see it in a traditional form of a check that was written and that he got all this money. He got you to buy a car. He got you to believe him. He got to understand what things made you happy, what things did not make you happy, and how you responded to it. You're a very smart person. You're a person with a PhD. So if you can respond that way, imagine what he can do with somebody that has no education and does not have 1/5 of the intellect that you do. Now, the other side to it also is that he's also testing grounds in the academic circle. You and I know that academia doesn't lend itself to dating. And the reason why is a very lonely journey. You're talking nerdy stuff with other colleagues and you're going to conferences and you get excited that your paper got published and all of that. But in the end, it's not, especially as somebody as an assistant professor working really hard to get tenure. These are stages in your life where you're going to be so distracted by your job, by your mission in life, by your students, by all the things that you're doing, that he's taking full advantage of that distraction. So again, he's learning. This is like AI, right? This is like a really evil AI, right? That is learning how you're acting. And even though when you step away from the computer, you're like, they never took anything away from you. Yeah, they did. They took time. They took your emotional investment. They took your feelings. And they also kidnapped a lot of your vulnerabilities, which are going to make you from this point forward, although a better dating partner, because you're going to be like on the lookout for all of these things.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a price that you paid.
Yeah, and maybe, hopefully, your doors and windows aren't wide open with jewels sitting on the sofa anymore. It's so interesting because that's how I am too. I think we're both, even though you are an academic and intellectual, you're also romantic like me. And I trust people. There's the romance, the love, the trust, the softness, the openness, my house doors and windows are open. Please come in. Can I make you some coffee? Let me tell you my story and I'll listen to your story and I'll believe everything that you have to say. That's what I've always been. That's the romance of it and the trust and the naive element that in some ways I actually like about me because it allows me to be open. And also I know that it allows me to be open to be targeted. And Lizzie, I think you and I have worked together. And I think part of our work together was allowing you to be open and also be aware. It's that balance between openness and awareness. So it's trusting with question marks. It's instead of trust, actually, let's change it to it's curiosity, not immediate trust.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that this relationship completely prepared me for meeting my husband. And despite all of the trauma that I really did feel, and it took me a long time to try to understand and to definitely emerge from, I don't think that I would have been in a place to attract my husband without it. So I'm not going to say I'm grateful for the con, but I'm grateful from the rebound of the con and my
from
doors,
the healing and the empowerment from it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And something that was really profound that I learned, and I don't think that I would have had the articulation of all of the nuggets of wisdom that you two have offered, which I agree with everything and really appreciate it. But I allowed myself to be told. I was not co-creating my
Right.
relationship with Michael. I was definitely an accessory. I was just watching it with wonderment. And with my husband, we are very much co-creators. And that's one
Yeah.
of the healthiest aspects of our relationship. And I'm just so grateful for it. And we have 2 kids. So this con was propulsive. And now I have the life that I always hoped I would. It's just not with the con artist. Is that
And
what
I
happened?
always say, yeah, I always say that previous relationships, they really lead you to a current relationship, which hopefully is a great one, right? So that's, my wife and I talk about that all the time, that had we not had previous relationships, we would have never appreciated who we are to one another. And I think that's also really important. But also because you have 2 kids, don't ignore this experience and put it in your bag of experiences so that you can then transpose that to your own kids, right? Because this will likely be, and I always say this with AI and technology and social media, Lizzie, our kids, in my case, in your case, your kids, are going to really get exposed to a level of manipulation by others and con artists that are going to be through a very different medium, i.e. social media, and in many ways AI and technology, but they're going to have a far-reaching, deeper-reaching mechanism than we were ever exposed to. So that is important for you to know as a mom and as a wife. Your antennas are always going to be up now. So that's
Now, I
great.
have a question about that. My kids are both boys, so obviously they are going to be raised to never treat a woman or a man or just never treat a romantic partner in this deceptive way. But are rom-conners also women? Or maybe if they are, it's a little bit less common.
100%. And I would argue, I don't want to let the expert talk about that, but I can tell you from a deviance perspective, from a criminological perspective, women are perhaps even more dangerous. And I hate to say that because I don't want to be judged as a gender biased person because I am a man, but women can be potentially more dangerous in conning a man than a man could be on a woman because I think women are far more intelligent. They have further reaches emotionally than a man does. And I can tell you that I have a boy and a girl. They're both grown up. And I worry more about my boy, they're both single, than my girl because of the fact that I know that he's incredibly bright and also very timid, very shy. And that presents vulnerabilities in his life that perhaps she may not have because she's the opposite. And I can tell you that that is something to be concerned. It's a great question, but I would say gender doesn't really make a difference, and we're seeing more numbers of those. But Laurel, I'll defer to you since this is your field.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Alex, that yes, the men are targeted just as frequently, if not more frequently. It's just that there is an element of pride, of ego, of shame that makes it so that men don't want to admit that this happened, that they seem to be conned in different ways. So it oftentimes is more of the financial con of a woman who, will present themselves in a sexual way, give them attention, make them feel special, make them feel wanted. And sometimes the man might be in another relationship, and because of that, he doesn't want to admit that he was conned by a woman outside of the relationship. So it is extremely common for men to be rom-conned. We actually just had a man on the show, but it's just that men don't tend to admit it, or they disregard it of just, oh, it was this B did this thing to me. And it's this hardened response of, this happened, but it's not a big deal. Or I succumbed because of my hormones, and that's why I allowed myself to get manipulated by this woman, but it's really not a con. There's a lot of rationalizing as to why they weren't conned, but the truth is that men are conned all the time, and very frequently and very aggressively and intensely. It's just that it's a different type of con. Women tend to be conned more emotionally and lethally and physically, whereas men are conned sexually and financially.
But they're also conned at a shorter, in other words, a man can actually be more, in terms of frequency, a con more frequently than a woman would because they happen in such a short amount of time. So like I met guys that I've worked with in the field and whatnot that they've been conned 10, 15 times in the course of their lifetime when they were single dads but they don't really tell you the story. They just say, oh yeah, man, that person was this and that. So I went on to somebody else. Oh boy, I know how to pick him. So they always pick it. They always put themselves as the culprit as opposed to I'm the victim, because as Laurel just said, it makes sense that men were socialized not to be victims. So for the most part, so I think I would be cautious. And I guess the impetus of your question is to think about, as you're raising your boys, what sort of things to think about. At some point, if you feel that there's a need or an opportunity, I would share a story with them about the conning effects, because the one thing that helped me deal with those potential conning components before I became a criminologist, and yet the person that has the most suspicion about every human being in the world, I will tell you that it was my mom. My mother, my strong relationship with my mom helped me understand the nature of women in some cases. And maybe I overgeneralized at times, but I can tell you that it helped me understand that, hey, there are people out there that are not really going to be looking out for you regardless of what they say and regardless of what they offer. And anyway, but I really do think that's important. And that's something that I'm glad you asked that question, because there may be members of the audience here that are also thinking, I'm a man, or I have boys, I don't have anything to worry about. Actually, you have a lot more to worry about because women, especially women today, are being raised for the most part as strong women that they can hear and they can see things that we men sometimes force ourselves not to see or hear.
So let's talk about healing after a RomCon really quickly, which it seems like it's something that you've done a lot of already, but it is about trusting your intuition again, not rewriting your past. So it's allowing yourself to have the reality, understand the truth, have the awareness and the data, the information, which is what we're doing here, right? So that you can move forward, not rewriting what happened, just being aware of it, and then really honing your intuition, which you said you did hear while this relationship was coming to an end. And know that, this element of being hopeful it's not a flaw. It's human. This scam was his deception, not your capacity to love. And the best protection really is, which is great for you guys, is education. Once you understand the psychology of a con, you remove their power. Awareness doesn't make you cynical. Asking questions doesn't make you cynical. It makes you safe. And that's something that's really important for anyone who's listening. You don't have to be afraid of asking too many questions of someone. You're just trying to keep yourself safe.
This was amazing. Okay. You guys are the best at what you do. This was such a privilege.
The privilege was for us, Lizzie, yes. And I'm glad I got a chance to see you.
Yeah, I have one sleeping child, but for how long? Who knows?
Yeah, okay.
You know what? Take it as it comes, man.
That's right. Okay. Lizzie, thank you so much for your honesty and for turning pain into power. Sharing your story can help someone else pause before they believe someone else's lie. Romance cons don't always start with a crime, but they always end with a loss. The goal is to stop them before they begin. This is RomConned, where love and true crime collide. Protect your heart, trust your instincts, and remember, manipulation may be their weapon, but truth is ours.
That was
right,
so
guys.
Isn't she good? Isn't she good?
Wow.